Let's see here. Let's see.
What are you looking on the Substack?
Yeah, to make sure.
Yeah,
It,
because we know it goes to YouTube and Facebook just fine.
yeah, but you put in this code every time.
Okay.
And then it makes me like have to click extra buttons, and I don't know why.
Okay. Probably so. As the host, it's probably a little more involved for you.
Yeah, but I also I'm guessing it's working.
Okay.
Because it changed what I can see, but it's like wanting to know if I'm trying to go live from my phone, and I'm like, no, I'm just trying to go live from my porch. If I was using my phone, the chickens would expect to get screen time. The chickens would be like, if it's portable, come look, I got an egg. Look how cool I am. They love showing off their eggs. Yesterday, Bo, Sarah Heath and I were talking. I've been talking to all the kind of coordinators for Theology Beer Camp and getting, if you talk to them one-on-one, they'll give you more critical commentary than they will in group talks where we're all like, yay, we survived. Nothing really broke. No one got hurt. Things
sense.
like that. And Meg, she dropped an egg about 2 minutes into the conversation. She comes running across the yard at peak speed going, just like, I just dropped this junk. I'm so successful. And she jumps, like, does a little chicken hop and flutters, lands on the deck, jumps onto the table I'm at, head pops over this. So it's like out of nowhere, Bo. Like if you were talking to me and then all of a sudden it's like,
yeah.
But she was like telling me, like, I did it, Dad. And Sarah's like, oh, there's a real niche Instagram account called Chicken Dad. I'm sure you're just waiting to take off with. And a number of friends that I talk to regularly have gone from when they first showed up at your house, you were complaining, and now it's half of what you talk about. And you're like, but the chickens never say, don't put me on social media.
Yeah.
Kids are like, I don't, you can't share that picture. The chickens, they pose.
I love when there's something going on that you're like trying to ignore, and you're thinking, well, I hope the person on the other end of the screen just doesn't notice that, like, I'm unflinching, like I'm just blocking that up. But if the chicken sticks its head over your camera, there's not a lot you can do to pretend like. Yeah.
No, did you see my Canadian?
I was trying to read what it was. Is it Roots?
Yeah.
Nice. Where'd you get that?
Myron Penner, the he was at Theology Beer Camp, does science and religion, philosopher of science and religion. He got it for my birthday. He's like, you should wear it. Anyone that is a Canadian will recognize it and say something to you. And it's true. I'm not that there's lots of Canadians in Greensboro, but if I just have it out, someone's like, are you from Canada? And
that's hilarious.
I'm like, no, I'm just friends with one. Friends with more than one, Bo, because you're Canadian too.
Yeah, at least partially. The first Roots store I can remember going to was actually in the West Edmonton Mall. We had driven over from Regina, Saskatchewan, and in the winter, because they had an indoor water park, including a wave pool and these massive water slides. And so I was in high school. We drove over there, and I think we each got to pick out a Roots piece of clothing.
Oh, It's like the Canadian Buckies. Like, you're like, why is this place such a big deal? And then you're like, oh, they really go hard for their genre. Like,
that's
until
hilarious.
you go to a Bucky's, you don't understand that, like, Bucky's is a Bucky's.
I am so glad that when I was down in January, I was down in Texas with my friend, that he took me to a Bucky's.
We should do something to remind me where to actually start the recording.
Okay.
I mean, not that it's not online right now, but I meant
Yeah. The
Yeah.
actual.
Yeah, I'm just gonna hit a button. Oh yeah. What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip. I'm here with the Bo Daddy. At some point we're gonna get to our topic, but I can't tell you when because Bo just wanted to talk about Bucky's. And I don't know.
I got to go to one in January, and so it's rare that something lives up to the hype. This thing had been so overpromised, I thought it can't possibly deliver. And then I go there, and Trip, I'm not kidding, man. I mean, I walked out with fudge, jerky, a pulled pork burrito, a flannel shirt. I mean, it was I could have left with a lawnmower, but the one thing the one thing I couldn't get over is essentially it's a truck stop, but doesn't allow trucks. There's no trucks allowed in the parking lot.
Yeah, it's like a Christian nationalist church. It's a church, but it doesn't allow Christians.
Oh man.
I'm joking.
Hey, I don't think I mentioned this on the last episode, but I got to go to. Did I tell you this? That I got to go to a.
No, it was on. You started to text me about it and said we're going to talk about it on the podcast.
Okay.
And then we didn't get to it because we only went 2 hours last week. So why would we get to the two topics we planned on talking about?
That's true. That was an epic episode, by the way. The stuff you said at the end, I liked so much. And I've been thinking about it ever since. But no, so I got to go to this closed door, off the record, totally anonymous secret meeting about I'm being serious, about how to combat white Christian nationalism in Idaho. And
which is trendy there, right?
Yes.
Because they don't have to do anything to get a large group of white people together. It's just Idaho.
Well, that could be anywhere, but yes. So anyway, not only did I learn a ton, it was really eye-opening and very good also to see like people on, whether it's they're on school boards or nonprofits or they're running for political office or whatever. It was just a very interesting collection of people. There were only 2 clergy people there, so I felt very honored, to be part of that. But and this is going to sound so stupid, but religion kept coming up.
You're saying that a gathering about religious nationalism?
I know it was, but it didn't come up in the ways you would expect it. So even though the topic was Christian nationalism, that's not the religious stuff that kept surfacing. It was like pastorally, my heart was so full because it was like almost like a 12-step recovery meeting, because whether people were deeply religious, like there was a lot of LDS folks there, but people who
they have like the lowest percentage of a predominantly white religious group that are Christian nationalist adjacent. Like when you're gauging because of their experience of religious oppression.
Yeah.
They're more committed to religious pluralism, but share a lot of the larger values. But they're more committed to religious pluralism because the rest, when they didn't count as Christian enough for the bulk of Protestants in America, we were like,
oh, interesting.
Let's hunt them down and stuff.
Huh. Okay.
And they're more confident in their missionary efforts.
See, I keep learning new stuff. This is so interesting. But the thing that made me the most curious is, so white Christian nationalists, they don't, but I was evangelical, and if you're fundamentalist or charismatic and so many branches of Protestantism, you often are taught that either the Catholic Church is obviously corrupt and apostate, and so you don't recognize Catholics as real Christians, and you definitely don't recognize Mormons pre Mitt Romney running for Republican presidential election.
Yeah.
But here's
running for a Republican presidential election
Yeah.
can normalize Mormons and pedophiles. It's amazing. It is like, you know,
Two different groups, but
two
not
different
Mormon.
groups, but
Yeah.
neither one of them were on the evangelicals will vote for you and call half of the
Oh, I
country
see.
evil for not supporting them. But nothing makes a white evangelical change their mind about pedos and Mormons like a GOP nomination.
Ouch.
You know why I said that? This is a short excursus, but I actually want to hear your story. But that sounds out of context because no one's heard this story.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so this week, Tuesday, voting day. So I'm going to vote, and
humble brag.
Yeah, I didn't think it was something I'd get this grateful for, but the where I vote early is different than where I vote day of, and I didn't piece this together because I'd always voted early.
Okay.
And Alicia had already gone to vote early, so I'm like, okay, I go over, and they're like, oh no, you don't vote here. You vote. Here's the address, and I'm like, oh, where's that? And they go, no, it's across the street at the Methodist church. And I literally didn't have to move my car. So I go walking around to my now polling place, and out front, like, as close as you get, like on the corner of the street, there's a big street that all turns around the big Methodist church, that's voting place. So there are 3 retired military guys. I assume they're retired, but they're probably like our age. They're within they're like 45 to 55. They got their I clearly served badges, F Ford 350, and they're like going nuts. And I'm like, oh, this could be interesting walking by. Here's what's on their signs. Trump sold out America for small children. Trump is a pedo. Make America safe for kids.
Oh my gosh.
They all voted for him. It was the Epstein thing. And you got these 3 guys in the F Ford 350 with a gun rack, like just letting everyone know what they think of the guy. And I was just like, hey, you got a point, and
That is interesting.
I was so worried walking up, like going, don't say anything, don't make eye contact. And then I see the sign and I'm like, reasonable.
That's interesting.
All right,
mine's
go
not
ahead. You're at a gathering.
Mine's not quite as stark
One
as
of 2
that.
clergy.
Oh, I can get back to that. But my interesting thing that happened recently was, I walk my dog every evening, and in my neighborhood, there are 4 houses that have enormous Trump flags and signs and banners. And a couple weeks ago, I noticed that they were all down. They're all gone. Off the flagpoles, like the U.S. flagpole off the side of the garage, they're all gone. And I started thinking, what's happening right now? And you know what it was? It was the day after the military thing where Hegseth,
Oh yeah,
right, and disparaged women in the military. And I think in my neighborhood, there are a lot of people who have served in the military or whose kids have or are tied in. And I think whatever that was so embarrassing and egregious, trip all 4 banners, flags, all came down. And now in my neighborhood, there's not a single thing as I walk my dog. There's no Trump paraphernalia anywhere.
They didn't at least leave it up for Halloween to try to scare somebody.
No, that's why I noticed. I was like, what's happening right now? I just thought it was really interesting. All right, so
wild. But
back to my
I
other
understand the military response.
Yeah, no,
a lot of the guys that served to my grandfather that I'm friends with online, had very hyperbolically critical takes for people that 6 months ago would have said, well, he has a point. It was one of those moments for military people that were like, somebody didn't give the man the rule book.
Whoa. All right, so back to my super secret meeting. Here is one of my
we're talking about on the internet.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying any details, but one of my biggest takeaways. Do you know who was the most offended by this exclusionary posture of the Christian fundamentalists, the white Christian nationalists? Were practicing Mormons and non-practicing Catholics. Because they would start everything they would say with, "Look, I mean, I don't go to church anymore. I'm a non-practicing Catholic, but what the f is their problem?" Sort of thing.
And now the Pope's like trolling them.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that was such a consistent pattern that I was like, I love trends, like anytime something happens like 2 or 3 times in a row, I'm like, oh, well, I got to pay attention here. So I just thought that was a very interesting dynamic that was in the room.
What was there something that group of people thought was like possible, pragmatic, and worth investing in, or was it more cathartic?
No, it was a working group. We were strategizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a webinar thing someday this week with Winland Cook at the Vanderbilt Center for Religion and Justice.
Okay.
With like Jorg Rieger and Jorge, oh man, theological ethicist. Anyway, Gabby.
Oh, I saw the
their
poster
last name.
for this.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, one of the things that kind of struck me, not so much in like I anticipated what the conversation was going to be about, because with that many people in an hour and a half, you have to like talk who's going to make what point, and we got to have it semi-structured, and then I still have to guide it because academics can't differentiate 5 and 15 minutes. But the chat of like a couple hundred people, like what they were responding to, the two big things that got by far the most energy or upvotes in the questions. One were like religious leaders in other countries that all upvoted this question going, we are having the same thing start on right-wing religion here.
Oh.
If you went back to 2016, is there something you would have done differently? Or how would you have guided clergy, faith leaders to kind of deal with the soil so it doesn't flourish in this space? And this Anglican clergy member was like, we're just kind of ignoring it and hoping it goes away. And I don't think it is, right? So that's one question. So there, which is fascinating because it's certain features that you could, like if 1 week, I don't remember, at some point, I came up with my like 7 variables to explain, like, and I was pitching them out on you, like which ones work more to try to explain like the big cultural shifts in religion and politics. Some of those you could eliminate if the same features are happening in other countries, because certain variables are unique to America, or unique to, say, technological practices in different cultures, or unique to think of, so you could eliminate some. I haven't gone back to think it through yet, but that was interesting. But the other thing that showed up, they got the most responses when Gabby shared their story of a posture of like clear but differentiated listening to people that in their family that have very intense different views. They grew up Catholic, working class, and if you end up doing a PhD with Jorg Rieger, you know what kind of Catholic social teachings. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, this is apparently what we're behind. This is great. But they shared a story, and it was extremely powerful, where people were just going through, and then so much that one of the follow-up questions was like, what did you learn in doing that? Because people were admitting they have no idea how to have that conversation.
Interesting.
And so, and I assume like people that join for stuff like that are probably in context where you have the ability to self-select, but that's not something that happens in Idaho. And you're talking about a gathering where you have like a much more diverse, ideologically diverse group showing up.
Yeah.
And one of the things where you live is you don't have the opportunity of opting out and just going to the right coffee shops or breweries, restaurants, theaters, and stuff, and never interact with those people. They're on your street. They're there. And so it made me think, like, one of the things that could be a genuine gift for people that are like struggling to hold integrity in, purple areas is to let progressives in on like the humanity of the people they're ignoring. And
Yeah.
what is it like to listen because the way Gabby told the story, there was at no point did they deny their commitments or their vision,
Yep.
but they wanted to know the other person's experience and find connection points for how they dream about the future and the struggles they were having. And it was one of those like moments that if you're watching the chat and what's getting upvoted,
Okay.
you're like, oh, those two bits
Huh.
have energy. Like the isolation, the inability to connect here, and people in other countries going, what would you do? It seems like this is movements
Yeah.
showing up here.
Interesting.
In that,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Anyway.
No, yeah. We live in actually such an interesting time because in many ways it feels unprecedented, and people talk about history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And so people are trying to find corollaries historically, but also with, modern media, in electronics, it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are struggling a little bit. Side note about Jorg Rieger. When I was in Las Vegas, I got to have a very conversation one morning with a person writing a book about their experience of organizing worker-led co-ops, specifically out of jail and prison. And but they're doing it under the guidance of Jorg Rieger. And I just mentioned something about how big of a fan I am of Jorg, or how much I appreciate him, or something that I quote him often, blah, blah, blah. And later the person came back to me and goes, how do you know Jorg Rieger? And I said, why do you ask? And they're like, I'm just curious where your world overlaps with his world. And I just said, a theology podcast. I was trying to be coy. But I appreciate Jorg, and I really love that he always is encouraging emerging scholars, that he's always bringing along the next generation. His heart in that is awesome.
Yeah, he's been supportive and encouraging to me, even though he decided to go on sabbatical in what would have been my first year doing a PhD. And
it probably wasn't personal.
I don't think so. He's told me, like, he was like, I liked you, but I didn't know you yet.
Yeah,
but I think it's worked out. I get to do lots of stuff with Jorg.
Yeah,
and I got to spend time with you and Phil and Jeremy and JC.
Yeah.
Dr. Min, man, talk about a character. Anselm Min, one of the most entertaining classroom professors, like as orthodox Catholic as it gets, and very much a Marxist.
Okay.
And he's always down to witness for either one. And so, like, if you're in a PhD seminar and you're like, oh, we're getting into a conversation I'm not prepared for, all you need to do is say something that could get him going, either about the religious, the need for a religious appreciation of Marxist critique, or why liberal Protestants don't understand the Trinity, and if they did, they'd be one. And either one of them, like, the rant just goes, and it's always entertaining, and like it's classic material. And there's very few people that have those two rants on the ready in the same body.
Yeah, that's unique. I know we're going to get started in a second talking about religion and Whitehead, but when I got to hang out with Jeremy Fackenthal in Minneapolis, we were just reminiscing, and I said, "Hey, do you remember the professor?" Because I was at Claremont School of Theology, which was on the north side of the street, and the Claremont Graduate Union was on the south side of the street, and you philosophy nerds were on the south side sometimes, and you had different professors, you had different faculty,
We
and I said,
practice hybridity. We went on both sides of the street.
"That's true, that's true." I said, "Hey, do you remember that professor who spent like half the year in Germany and then half the year here?" And
Ingolf.
that guy was a character.
Ingolf Dalfert. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. A walking encyclopedia.
Unbelievable.
Dude, you were with us that time we went out on Cinco de Mayo, and he didn't know what Cinco de Mayo was because he's European, but he's in Los Angeles for his first Cinco de Mayo, and we just finished like a Schleiermacher seminar or something like this at
Yeah.
6:30, and we're like Iggy D, which he asked at some point if he had a nickname, and I volunteered it, to which he regretted probably asking, but then I figured I'd get permission to call him this now.
Yeah.
He didn't like it, but I was like, Iggy D, we're gonna go to the Mexican restaurant. You know, it's Cinco de Mayo. And he was like, do you normally say dates in other languages? You know, like, no, it's Americans coming up with a reason to eat Mexican and drink tequila. And we pretend as if it's an actual holiday. But in Los Angeles, it is, because everyone's in on it. We go to this Mexican restaurant in downtown Claremont, and there's like 6 or 7 PhD students, Iggy D, and every like 30 minutes they walk around with shots of tequila. And let's just say certain individuals in our group are fine drinking tequila, and others, you know, it hits harder than expected, especially
Some
if
people can't deal with it.
your microbiome's not used to metabolizing agave alcohol.
No.
So very quickly I realized this is turning into one of the greatest opportunities to get unfiltered answers to questions. And you, like, at this table though, because Claremont Graduate University is a huge diversity of theological and philosophical positions. So we had like the psychoanalytic Marxist, the like fundamentalist Calvinist, the post-Muslim multi-religious integral thinker, the Spinozist Jain. Like, there's like we're all friends, but there's very little in common. And no one has heard Iggy D talk about what he actually thinks, because in class he plays whatever his character is.
Yep.
And so I'm like, he's kind of loose here. I'm just gonna ask him vague questions on topics that he's unaware at the table of how divisive they'll be, and watch the social awkwardness for my friends not knowing whether they want to voice to someone grading their papers, just like, you know, what they really think. And it was one of the funniest experiences. And here, I'll tell you one, I asked this one question that I know is going to blow the table up. I said, Dalford, you know, last week after class, we had an argument, you know, about Schleiermacher's understanding of the resurrection. And, you know, you gave a slight pushback, but then affirmed like the hermeneutical intuitions of what Schleiermacher's getting at, and that the resurrection is an event that gives the world back to you as new creation. Does that statement mean anything other beyond like the way you interpret reality? And if so, is the resurrection primarily a hermeneutical key, or did God do anything that matters to matter? He does first explain Schleiermacher, Bultmann, Jungel, complains about Pannenberg and Moltmann, like, you know, he's doing German theology, and then he's like, but Hegel has this point, and this is like important to get what Hegel's doing, but like, and he's laying it all out, and then the really conservative Calvinist guy is like, Dr. Dalford, are you telling me, because he's a clergy, that you are indifferent to the affirmation of the resurrection and what it says about the corpse of Jesus? And Dolphert looks at him and he goes, I am done with this conversation. I need more chips. I lose it. Anyway, he was so funny. Really encouraging. Excellent responses, like on your papers.
Yeah.
Anyway, wonderful professor. But his one trip on Cinco de Mayo, he told us he would go out with us again, but not when they're walking around handing out tequila.
It didn't agree with his German sensibilities.
Yeah, he was like, I will stay when you go to the Back Abbey, which is this like Belgian beer bar. Which, if you can guess where Bo and Trip might go if they have Belgian beer on tap and truffle fries.
Truffle fries.
Fried in duck fat.
That's right. I forgot about that. They were so good.
They were like, how can we get an extra 100 calories in these fries? I don't know if I could eat a whole thing of those fries these days. I never eat fries anymore.
If you were a graduate student on that budget, you could.
Yeah. I think I've evolved. I've evolved enough to not really eat potatoes very often unless it's potato soup. Anyway,
should we get started?
Yeah, I feel like we've totally got our intro done.
Have we?
I've under-socialized this week, so just sorry, Bo.
No, it's great. Hey, I do want to tell you two things I did text you about. I just want to mention because I think they're going to become important in the months ahead. We decided to go ahead and start that pantry in the room downstairs between where we serve the community meal every Sunday and where the clothing closet is. We decided we're going to go ahead and start it. So I put together a team this week, and they started reaching out to everybody from dairy farmers, 4-H, St. Luke's Hospital, anyone we can think of to say, do you want to partner with us in this? So I'm very excited to see where it goes. So that's in my own house here. And then, Trip, I had a conversation yesterday with the special assistant to the bishop.
Oh.
To inquire about there's an empty building, an abandoned building about 30 miles north of here in an agricultural community that's in real need, and about converting it into a community center. And that conversation went better than expected. And so things are really cooking around here, and I'm like super excited, but I'm definitely my brain, like I've had to partition parts of my brain, and most of it is thinking about property management and community outreach right now. So it was very nice to read your essay about Whitehead's understanding of religion. It really brought me back. I'm being serious here. I read it like devotionally this morning, and it really brought me back and centered me in why we're doing what we're doing. So I am excited to have this conversation.
Oh, you liked it?
Yep. I did like
dude.
it.
Okay, so one, I've got this,
but maybe not for the reason you think.
No,
go ahead.
But I've been while I'm doing the Whitehead reading group, I've been trying to write things, and then so I'll like take my outline, write it, and then I'll ask the AI to tell me all the things in it that I shouldn't.
Are you serious?
I'll ask it to tell me what should I rewrite if I want the reader not to have a graduate degree to understand this, and then I'll put in I have a PDF of like my descriptions and the references in Whitehead about his concepts, where like when I'm teaching process, I have it there. So if someone's asking about prehension, right, I have Tripp's definition, and then I have the references to like 7 or 8 passages where you can see how the concept emerges and how he uses it in different contexts, this kind of thing. And so it will usually, obviously for Whitehead, pick those out, and then and because it doesn't understand Whitehead, but if I tell it what these words mean, then it's like, you should change this, and like change these 3 or 4 things.
Wow.
And then I just write them like I was preaching. versus writing what I'm thinking about Whitehead, and is great.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel about that, but maybe it doesn't matter how I feel
I
about
don't.
that.
I was like, oh, I can't remember who. Someone at camp told me about it. One of the theologians there said
Yeah.
um, that it's saved them time for figuring out where they are unaware that they've lost people. So you just put in your essay and ask, like,
Wow.
if I wanted to communicate this to college educated but not graduate specific people, where would you edit what isn't clear?
That is wild.
And they did a great job. And so then
Huh.
like there are two sections of that I wrote that weren't involved in the original one, like the whole opening where it's like, why are you doing this? Like, if people understand the question that drives your writing, they're more likely to follow it. But personalizing is often difficult for academics like you. And I was like, okay, a personal introduction. And anyway, it was kind of wild experience.
That is very interesting. I've never done anything like that. I mean, the closest I've ever come is the year I was a professor, I used software to determine if there was plagiarism,
Yeah.
but I've never done anything like you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So you tell me where you want to start.
All right.
Or I have a starting point if you want me to give one.
Either way, but I would probably start just where you started, which was with experience. Just the centrality and validity of experience and the depth of human existence. Like, what a great starting point, right? Instead of starting in the abstract and theory and conceptually, to start with experience is just a grounded practice. I loved it.
Yeah, there's a one of the things to me about Evan's comment.
Oh, I have the chat off. Hold on, I'm going to open up my chat. Oh boy.
Yeah, so for me, one of the things that Whitehead dwells quite a bit on is the relationship between the experience and then how that experience gets articulated or encapsulated. And he has this move from solitariness to world loyalty, and I think that religious institutions and religious traditions so often become hyper fixated on the expression that comes out of the experience, that it leads to a kind of staleness, because we have this idea that and this was part of our conversation. This is why I thought of it. Our conversation last week about where our uncomfortability is with the kind of post-liberalism, right? Like where language is settled and normative to generate the experience, is though that language has emerged throughout the church to articulate the experience.
Right.
Like none of the disciples needed a explanation of Jesus' personhood using Platonist metaphysics to call him the Christ and to die being faithful. And so like when you start to see theological investment or the task properly in Whiteheadian sense, but I think that's actually true for a whole lot more theologians, as a second order discourse.
Yep.
Whose accountability is to the experience or the encounter, then you don't take yourself as seriously, and you don't think it's success if, for example, like mainline Protestant confirmation curriculum, you get them to understand why your denomination's theory of the Eucharist is better than everyone else's, or how
Even
the
if
Trinity works. Yeah, no,
doesn't
it is.
matter. Yeah,
I mean, you don't have to explain to me as a Baptist that I sometimes roll my eyes at The other, but Whitehead has this line where he's picking up on the debates about the Eucharist express that gap between experience and expression. And he says, expression is the one fundamental sacrament. It is the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace, right? And so, like, the expression sacramental because it is making present the experience, but it isn't the experience. And so he goes on.
So helpful, that distinction.
In like a paragraph or so later, he said, the primary expression mainly clothes itself in the media of action and of words, but also art. Their expressiveness to others arises from the fact that they're interpretable in terms of intuitions of the recipients. Apart from such interpretation, the modes of expression remain accidental, unrationalized happenings of mere sense experience. But with such interpretation, the recipient extends his apprehension of the ordered universe by penetrating into the inward nature of the originator of the expression. There is then a community of intuition by reason of the sacrament of expression proffered by one and received by the other. For Christians, so much of this, like the theological way of saying this is the theologian's task is to handle the tradition so that it creates a sacred spaciousness that the individuals and the community come to participate in the mind of Christ. Namely, the experiential encounter of Jesus is something we come to share, which is like, that is also Schleiermacher's insight in early liberal theology and this kind of thing. But the post-liberal critique of it is like, oh, it becomes feeling centric. And one of the things that Whitehead is insisting on is that, like, you miss the nature of experience if you reduce it to feelings, like just to affect. It's also about orientation. It's also about anticipation. It's also about commitment to values and these kinds of things that are inherent in the universe. And religion is the place in which the awareness and orientation to value has emerged. And it's also a place where you tether the deeper commitments you hope to internalize and then embody. There's this other line. This is towards the end of the book, where he says, the final principle of religion is that there is a wisdom in the nature of things, from which flow our direction of practice and our possibility of theoretical analysis of fact. It grounds this principle upon two sources of evidence. And this is like how he sees science and religion relating. First, upon our success in various special theoretical sciences, physical and otherwise. And secondly, upon our knowledge of a discernment of ordered relationships, especially in aesthetic valuations, which stretches far beyond anything which has been expressed systematically in words, right? And so oftentimes people think religious expression is in competition with scientific expression. And he's going, like, they're different orientation points. One is like objective accidents of the world organized in structured thought, and the other is precisely something that's that can't be collapsed into that, because it escapes the limits of language. It's aesthetic, it's valuative, these kinds of things. And then after that he says, according to religion, this discernment of relationship forms in itself the very substance of existence. The formulations are the froth upon the surface. Religion insists that the world is a mutually adjusted disposition of things issuing in value for its own sake. This is the very point that science is always forgetting. Religions, however, commit suicide when they find their inspirations in their dogma. The inspiration of religion lies in the history of religion, namely the emergence of value in communities with tenacious fidelity to it. I was like, come on. Whitehead can warm a man's heart. Strangely warm my heart.
Let me tell you two touch points for me, why it resonated, I think, so deeply with me. In my academic field of practical theology, one of the things that it is a major emphasis is the experience of faith, right? And investigating whether it's a communal expression or a personal narrative, but that experience is a valid loci, a valid location of theological revelation and reflection. And so it is valid and important as a living text, right? So that's like for me a really, really important thing, because the second touch point is, as a committed Wesleyan theologically, we have that quadrilateral that starts with scripture, prima scriptura, and then we go to the tradition, and then we go to experience, and then reason. Experience being one of the four, locations of revelation and religious commitment. The validation of that. So between my pastoral theological education and my academic field, there were two things. Now, I haven't engaged Whitehead very deeply. I've only read like introductory books, let's say, by whether it's Cobb or Bruce Epperly or Marjorie Suhaki, right? People who have either been influenced by Whitehead or are trying to explain Whitehead. But I haven't read a lot of Whitehead, except when quotes show up in things you've written. That's sort of my biggest engagement. So to actually read some of the stuff that you put in this essay, it really, honestly, it intrigued me, because I didn't realize how central experience was to his project. It was really eye-opening.
Yeah, he's a radical empiricist. And one thing about what you just said, because I've been trying to think of catchy ways of articulating it, but I think some people see the theologian's task is stewarding an expression, because that expression ultimately gives one access to the divine. And what Whitehead points out early in the book, when he's looking at the history of religion, especially the religions that emerge in the last 4,000 5,000 years, from the axial age on, religion takes this shift where it emerges in a space of ritual and emotion collectively and such. Then over time you end up developing myths and symbols and these things around the rituals, and then it gets to the point where you have a prophet who is now, on behalf of religion, critiquing the very collective that developed religions evolutionarily. Okay. Or a martyr who's like, I'm going to be faithful to this in contrast to the collective. So religion starts in as a collective thing and then becomes creates this kind of ultimate kind of solitariness of the individual. And when it's in that space, then the horizon of religious belonging is no longer tribal or social. It's world consciousness, kind of where he ultimately calls religion world loyalty.
Interesting.
Because that which you encounter in your solitariness is that which everyone can encounter in their solitariness, right? And so you get this switch of what Whitehead's kind of pointing to the religions of the day is saying, like, you're obsessed with the expression your tradition has because you think that's how you get access to it.
Interesting.
As opposed to thinking the expressions are actually to help orient the individual so that they're exposed to what's actually present in every moment of becoming. Like, every person is greeted moment to moment an encounter with the divine that lures, calls you into greater beauty, truth, goodness, adventure, zest, those kinds of things. And so the second order discourse of theology, the expression of it, is about exposure, helping us be exposed to what God itself done in Christ, a mind we can share as individuals and in community, versus like access to Christ or access to salvation. And that distinction between theologian of access and theologians of exposure is really that's become kind of like, not that it's not always there and I hadn't thought about it, but like reading this book again with Andrew and the questions people have been asking in the reading group, made me think, oh, I think that's something important to say, because that is not how we naturally think as Protestant ministers. We think of ourselves and our particular tradition in contrast to our other peers of other traditions, or the traditions of a particular church, or these kinds of things. And
Yeah.
we might sit there and we want to help more people get access to it, or this kind of thing. But Whitehead has this deep confidence that there is the potential of being exposed to the invitation of divine valuation that you get to collaborate with in every moment. And so, what is it the expressions of our faith are to do, is to actually help us be more and more exposed to something that calls us beyond ourselves. And,
Hmm.
and, I'm like, "Mm, yeah, I like this." But I don't know if access or exposure is the best language. I've just been thinking about it. Um,
Hmm.
but exposure would put process and radical tradition in their collaborative there, right?
Yeah. Two things I did want to follow up with you about. One, I think, was your starting point about people who sort of say, because you started conversationally, and so people saying, I just can't do this God thing
Yeah.
anymore. I'm sort of done with religion, but I also don't want to be a reductive physicalist and say that it's nothing more than neurons and you know endorphins or whatever, and
Hmm.
synapses firing, and I don't want to explain it away. I know there's a depth, and I don't want to get rid of the depth of these experiences, like value and love, and right. So I guess the question is, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is I, I should start in a different place. I apologize. I've been
Yeah,
working
you're
on an
grounded, Bo.
I've been working on an essay called "In Defense of Deconstruction," but I'm writing it as a social constructivist. And for me, that philosophical commitment is central because the word deconstruction has the word construct in it.
Hmm.
And what I'm running into, and I've actually been testing this out in conversation with my nuns and duns friends, and so far it's getting good feedback. But what I'm running into is that the way deconstruction has become popularized, especially for like evangelicals and um, in many Protestant circles, it's not deconstruction. And I don't say this as like a gatekeeper or I'm not policing, I'm not doing word policing. I'm saying it's not deconstruction. It's disbelief, it is
Hmm.
dismissal, it is distancing, right? Destruction. It can be many other things. The problem is it's not deconstruction. Deconstruction says, like, for instance, uh, how did books get into the canon? Like, when was the canon finalized as our New Testament? And looking at the construction of those books that got in that process, right? That's part of saying this is how this got constructed. Or if it's not allowing women in ministry. So how was the entire concept of ordination? It's a social construct. So how is it constructed, right? And deconstructing it.
Hmm.
That's very different than just walking away from the project altogether. And by the way, it's if people need to do that, if that's part of their spiritual journey, I'm not criticizing that. Or if they just say, look, I simply don't believe this anymore, that's fine too, right? But it's not deconstruction. Disbelief or demolition, destruction, distancing, dismissal, they're all valid, but it's not deconstruction. So I'm working on this thing, and I'm testing it out with real people like, how does this sit with you? And so far, it's getting pretty good response. All of that is to bring me back to your initial paragraph about people who find themselves in a situation where they're like, I can't do the God thing anymore. And you said you get it, and I certainly get it. So how does the Whiteheadian concepts that you walk us through in this thing, where would a person tie into those, or in what way would it be generative? Like where would they access this, or where would it access them if they have just pushed away from the table? That's my only lingering question, is where does this intersect? Where's the dovetail or the fertilization? Like, where's the seed planted? So that's my only question, is where does that impact them?
Yeah. Well, so one part of it that this is something, and I don't know if I expressed this part well, but one of the points Whitehead's making throughout is that religion is it's not inherently good, but it is inherent to existence, right? Like the how he's defining religion.
Yeah.
The encounter, the individual's encounter with potentiality in every moment.
Huh.
When the self becomes more oriented towards that, right, is a thread that runs through. And in the essay, I use a few of his examples of like Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Dorothy Day, right? Was trying to point out like the like religion, like you are religious, but you do science, like this distinction. So like religion for him is uh, it's about value and responding to it and this kind of thing. And if we start to recognize that the germ or the emergence of religion is responding to the advent of value moment to moment, then oftentimes all the D words you use are responses to value, right? So when the Quakers told the rest of Protestantism in America, you can't be a Christian and not be an abolitionist, they're responding to value. When they chose to not call them friends, communities of friends, and not churches, because they don't want to. It's not because they were like, I don't really want to be a Christian. It's like, no. There's something I need to say yes to that is like the accommodating to this is problematic. We want abolition, right? Or the example
Yeah.
of the recognition of equality of genders, right? There's another place where it's responding to value. And like when Tom and I 2 years ago, we had the our book on God and deconstruction come out, and we did these surveys. Half of the big reasons people deconstruct are like the classic philosophy of religion questions, like pluralism or evil, divine action, these kind of things. But the other half are all broadly ethical, right? Like, why would I call good a community that protects X? Why would I call good someone that generates intense shame for being a embodied person with sexual desires? Why would I call good a community that becomes infatuated with nationalism? Why would I, right? And so like the activity of critique or deconstruction or whatever is an actual response to value in the Whiteheadian sense. So like oftentimes the dismissal or disbelief or whatever is helping them see that like you're making that critique because you're actually committed to something genuine, that it's not just like you prefer religious poetry with no traction in the world that's nicer than your other friends that have religious poetry that just sounds rather insular. It's the affective experience of seeing an expression of faith that doesn't recognize the God belovedness of an immigrant is an actual response, a genuinely religious response to the divine, right? And so part of it is that narration element.
Yep.
The other side of it, I only remember this line because on Catherine Keller's first time on the podcast, she said it, and you told me, like, when we first met in person, like, that made complete sense, and now I understand what they mean by deconstruction. Where she goes, this was her responding to kind of the radical theologians, and she was like, okay, well, deconstruction, that's the recognition that all theology is a construct and we can do better, so do better, right? um and I think a lot of times there's this anxiety that shows up if you've been told true religion is the final expression. Then you're like, I'm no longer being religious because I don't have certainty, finality, clarity, confidence like those real religious people who can speak with certainty about the appropriate expression that truly captures the living, biblical, true, inerrant, whatever God, right? And Catherine, listening to the deconstruction people, are like, yes, but when did you think something we did with human words wasn't a human construction? You can't, like, the tools you're using, we come up with, they evolve through time and culture. It is a construction. So do better. And in the conversation, she was like, that's why the prophets were obsessed with two things: idolatry, right? When we confuse our expression with the experience or the encounter.
Wow.
And they're really get worked up when the expression legitimates material oppression. And that's where she does the line, the matter of theology is matter mattering. And you're just like, come on, Catherine. If I ever came up with lines like that, I would write it down on a Post-it and not work the rest of the day. Like,
I'd go have a celebratory cigar.
Yeah, you're like, what'd you do today? Everyone gets home. Alicia's like, did you just sit on the porch smoking cigars? I didn't even see a computer or a book near you. And I'm like, look at this.
Look at this.
The matter of religion is matter mattering. Come on.
No, that's good stuff.
Let's use we got a question here that's connected to this.
What would take to prevent any religion?
No, read it in Bo voice, because the people listening, which is the overwhelming majority, will not be looking at the screen.
I hear. Okay, I get you. Guy Mystic says, do you have any insight on what it would take to prevent any religion emerging out of an experience from becoming dogmatic? Is it developmental? Oh, man, this is a fun question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the passage that pops in my head from Religion in the Making. But before this, I think historically, he's saying, Whitehead says, like, what comes last is actually more essential to the essence of religion than what came first, right? Because there was hundreds of thousands of years of ritual and emotions at the social collective level before interiority or solitariness emerge, where the individual is now responding to value over against the culture, social. And that required myths, text, and things like that to cultivate the interiority, right? So he gets to the fourth stage, belief emerges, then rationalization, right? And he means critical reflection on behalf of the deepest values expressed in your religion over against the religion, community, tradition, systems that are there. And so, like, in one sense, dogmatic expressions is one of the conditions for the possibility of a prophet or a martyr, and it is not the heart of what emerges with dogmatic religion. And he gives this metaphor of the ark, which is one of my favorite Whitehead passages, where he goes,
Ark, A-R-K?
Yeah, like Noah's Ark.
Okay.
So he says, a system of dogmas may be the ark within which the church floats safely down the world tide of history. But the church will perish unless it opens its windows and lets out the dove to search for an olive branch. Right? Like, is there life elsewhere outside the ark of salvation? Sometimes even it will do well to disembark on Mount Ararat and build a new altar to the divine spirit, an altar neither in Mount Gerizim nor yet at Jerusalem. Right? So you're building a new altar right? A new orientation for the religious community. And you're consciously aware that it's neither the foundation of the faith, because that isn't its a rival, Abraham, and it's not the eschatological banquet, the New Jerusalem, this image. And so to me, one of the things I love about that image is, it's picking up on, for most of church history, there was a very exclusivist assumption that salvation comes by being in the ark of the church. And he's like, it's good for the ark occasionally to open a window and let the dove realize there's life elsewhere, right? Brings back but it also, sometimes the ark gets stranded and it gets stuck. And if you think the primary thing is figuring out how to flood everything so your ark can stop floating again, you're missing the point. You might have to do what Noah did. Get out, build a new altar, and now there's a new instantiation. While being self-aware that this expression that's needed in this moment is not Jerusalem. And what's needed in this moment is not to return to the first time the ark got stuck. Anyway, I just am like, come on, one paragraph, and it's basically like a philosopher's sermon of what constructive theology should be.
Very sermonic. I love it. Two things come to mind. This past week, I preached on All Saints. I preached on inheriting your parents' Scrabble board.
Ooh.
And the art of playing Scrabble, and I compared it to the art of spirituality, is not to try and reconstruct the last game that you played with your parents and get the board to be exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
The art is to play the tiles that you have in your hand in a way that is faithful to the way that your parents taught you to play the game. The expression will be different, right? But the experience that you're talking about, now I'm using your language, the experience is the art of playing, not the final expression.
Oh, yeah. Well, it reminds me of that. What was the Barry Taylor story about the hat?
I don't know. The hat?
Like Picasso's hat or something.
I don't know.
Man, it was one of those I've heard him use a few times, and this is what it made me think of, and now I can't remember it.
Okay.
Well.
The wearing, it's like, the wearing your grandfather's hat. I remember him talking about it. I don't remember what the punchline was. So when we have a tradition or an expression that is frozen in amber, that is when it becomes an empty ritual, right? This is the form of religion that people are tired of, is the one that is concretized and unchanging, right? It's no longer a living text with flexibility and pliability, but it's answering questions from a couple centuries ago, but has nothing to say to our current moment, right? And I understand, I really understand people's frustration with that. And just in a moment of self-confession, I mean, the honest truth is, Trip, if I wasn't a pastor, I don't know that I would go to church, right? Like, except that this is my calling and my vocation to do contextual theology within the 21st century society, the technological society we find ourselves in. But because I have that internal permission and the theological trajectory to contextualize belief, religious practice, all that stuff. But if it weren't for that, like the year I was a professor, I think I attended 35 churches.
Like different ones?
Yeah, in the Portland area. I wouldn't attend a single one. It doesn't.
Did you hand report cards when you were leaving?
I didn't. But once in a while, someone would figure out that I was the visiting professor at the seminary, and they would want feedback on, and I couldn't do it, man. I was like, no, I'm just a guest today.
I know. The worst is when they're paying you to be a guest speaker and ask for feedback. Okay, here's a question. Alicia's very much like you.
Okay.
I I would like to go to church 3 times a week. I love going to church. I only have to be marginally interested in what's happening to enjoy it. But I have discovered since moving back, and neither one of us work at a church, which is like, it was horrible visiting churches. Like, I don't understand what a large number of clergy call success. And I don't mean like growing or whatever. I just mean, has no one asked anyone that visited this place why there's no chance in hell they're coming back?
Yeah.
Like I get oh, here we go. Look at this.
Amanda?
Amanda's agrees with you.
Yeah.
We also got the Barry Taylor quote.
Oh.
There are 2 ways of honoring your tradition, he said. One is to wear your father's hat, and the other is to have children. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm glad you remembered that. I did not remember the punchline there.
Says the most extroverted person ever. But I think I'm like a Wednesday night fundamentalist. I love Wednesday night because 1, there's food. 2, like, the half the people at the church that go 2 times a month just to worship, and they probably are there out of requirement or like guilt, or they don't go on Wednesday night. So when you go on Wednesday night, you eat with people, then there's like all these different things. And my new thing is I go to whichever of the breakout small group things for adults that are like the least intellectual.
Okay.
Which usually means I'm doing like crafts that involve sharing with old ladies. And now Alicia's like, Trip, deep down, you really just like hanging out with church ladies that are twice your age, which is true. And I don't like every church I've worked at, retired women, my favorites. They love Trip, which is crazy because their husbands are like, why do you like him? He's the oddest fit here. And I just love hanging out with them. We're doing gratitude prayer crafts currently. Like, I wouldn't have done that, but I'm like, the last thing I want is to go to like a Bible study or theology one and then sit there trying to decide if I'm supposed to talk or not, because they really want someone to talk, and then I'm gonna be like, here's my thoughts. I've got enough looks, from clergy that I'm really glad exist and are great to my children, that I don't want to be like the Debbie Downer and be like. So I like prayer and art. And then you get to hear the stories of all these people that are twice your age and about their faith and how it shapes them and stuff.
Fascinating.
And it's great. The other perk is when you're talking with like old ladies in their 70s, they have like a real experience when democracy worked. That's always nice to hear. Like when the parents my age voice deep anxiety, they'll be like, yeah, but there was a time I couldn't vote, and we made progress, so let's not give up. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
All right, so I want to go back to Guy's question because I've been thinking about it, and I want to throw out a proposal.
Are you going to see if he can find another quote we only half remember? Because maybe he's a new research assistant.
So far, you've brought up Catherine Keller's original quote, and now he found the Barry Taylor quote. I feel enriched this morning between the Whitehead, the Catherine Keller, and the Barry Taylor. I'm feeling good.
I know.
All right. I want to present like a flow chart. Okay, it's a verbal flow chart.
Verbal flow. It's like theological rapping.
Can you put his question back up just as a reference point for people who?
Yep.
All right.
Wait. There we go.
All right. Do you have any insight on what it would take to prevent any religion emerging out of experience from becoming dogmatic? Is it developmental? So let me present this. I know people are going to be able to poke holes in it, and
okay.
I'm inviting it. I know it's coming, and I'm inviting it. Okay, but let me just walk through what popped into my brain. So let's say that you have, whether you call it a transcendent or a spiritual experience, one morning you wake up before the sun and you find yourself either going down to the river or up to the mountaintop, and you experience the sunrise. And this is for you a religious, let's say, moment, an right? Transcendental, a touch of eternity. The veil is thin, whatever. Okay. But to get from there to religion, you'd have to go through several layers of refinement and development, right? In an evolutionary sense of the development. So this would have to become an orientation where you found yourself repeatedly, let's say, down by the river at sunrise or up on the mountaintop, right?
Uh-huh.
So this becomes an orientation where you find this meaningful and helpful, and it draws you. There's something in it that pulls at you, okay? But from there, there's several things between that experience and what would become the expression, a religious expression, which is that at some point you have to add narration. There has to be a story, right? A
Yeah.
narrative that often involves mythologizing. So that you'd have to say, where does the sun come from? Where is it
Yeah.
when I can't see it, right? You'd mythologize, and then that would become structured. So the art would be, if you didn't want it to end up being dogmatic in the end, the art would be in that moment, however it gets structured, to include some preventative or inoculating sense that it's not dogmatic, right? So that would have to be, I'm saying,
Like the
early on.
apophatic moment.
Yeah. Yes. So before the Jello sets in the mold,
Ooh, the
you
Jello.
have you have to get the cottage cheese in early before the Jello mold sets. Okay. Then from there, it becomes ritualized. So on the first of the month, we always go up to the mountaintop, or whatever it is, every Sunday. So that when you add ritual to it, and then the ritual gets repeated, right? So then the over and over, and then in some sense the mythology and the narrative gets rehearsed.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is like what happens in most of the rituals, baptism, Eucharist.
Yeah. And then from there would be commitment, so that people would say, I'll go with you every month or every Sunday. That creates community, which is belonging, right? And then you'd have a religion, right? Or a religious expression or a religious community or belonging. So in my quick sketching on a sticky note, that's the flow chart that, and all of that is to say, you'd have to get the dogmatic, the anti-dogmatic thing in early. You couldn't add it at the end. It can't be your final step.
Yeah. It would be like, I don't know, let's say you had 10 commandments, and at the very beginning, you insist both, there's no other God before me, and you're against, and you're against idolatry.
Oh, right.
One of the things that flowchart actually makes me think of is that it's pointing out why so many of the theologians we enjoy reading drew that distinction between theology and theopoetics, because like the logocentric nature of theology has this kind of it performs finality even if it's self-aware that it's not. And that's different than saying I'm doing theopoetics. Like in the poesis, I mean, that just means like artful, crafted making that the theologian is making, but it's making in response to something that you don't just make, you keep making, right? Like there's like when you do theopoetics, you don't do it once, as opposed to like having a systematic theology and being like, period. The yeah, but see, even in those rehearsal bits, what comes to my mind is you have the narrative that shows up in Scripture of, say, the Eucharist. Then you have its function. You see in the early church, Paul's letting people know, like, oh, you're screwing up this ritual because all you rich people that didn't work are loaded in Corinth when the poor people get there and they don't even have food because you ate it all. Like, what are you doing? You know,
And you're
there's
3
always,
cheeks to the wind.
yeah. You know, I didn't mean that spirit filled. It's so but everyone knows. I mean, especially if you're clergy, you see this when you're serving communion. Like, it's not like it always hits for everybody, but it's hitting for somebody, right? And there are plenty of times in Eucharist where, like, we're collectively holding space for that encounter, but it's not like that encounter is always the same for everyone or consistent. But it in the rehearsal of it, it does point you back to the times it's become transparent, right? Or like baptisms. For those people that practice unbiblical baptisms of children, like you have to see another one to know what happened to you. Or if you had believers baptism, when other ones happen, you're remembering a time you chose for yourself to become a part of the body of Christ. And so the repetition is both a rehearsal of the narrative that the form and content and stuff's kind of connected to, but it's also a remembering of the times those rituals have been like life orienting for you. So it's kind of like calling you back to the encounter or the experience through the repetition of the expression.
On a side note, this is a rabbit trail. I have to tell you what happened in communion last week. So we were, it was All Saints. And so we often do classic communion where like people come forward and they get a piece of bread and they dip it in the cup. We use intinction. But sometimes we do, we set up 6 tables around the sanctuary and we go to the closest table and we're at table together.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have that sort of dispersed communion. We have traditional communion and our classic. But this month, because it was All Saints, I decided to go ultra traditional. I was going to wear my robe and stole, and we were going to do the Great Thanksgiving, which is like this litany where it's really wordy, right? And I was so excited for it, but I haven't done it. I haven't done the Great Thanksgiving in probably 2 or 3 years, and I was really out of practice. So I preached this message. And but while I'm preaching, because I've been drinking coffee all morning, getting ready for Sunday school and everything. And while I'm preaching, I can tell my breath is terrible. It's coffee breath and it's awful. But I hadn't brought gum into the sanctuary with me. And the only thing I could see on the front pew was a mint. There was like a one that you get from like the big circle one they used to get at like Pizza Hut or whatever. And so on my way down to do the Great Thanksgiving for communion, I decided to grab this mint. But because I have this book that's open for me to do the Great Thanksgiving, it's on a music stand. And then I had printed out the PowerPoint slides so I could see what people were seeing and where they could join me in the call and response. I didn't have a place. I didn't know where to put my mint. And so I thought, I'll just put it in my mouth and move it over to the side of my cheek, and I'll just keep it there like a chipmunk. And that way, when after the Great Thanksgiving, because I use my hands during the thing, like lift your hearts to the Lord, right? The whole thing. So I had this big mint in the side of my cheek, and it comes dislodged. It didn't stay in the side of my cheek. So now I'm trying to do the litany, and I have this mints because I'm not used to eating mints rattling around. You can hear it bumping against my teeth, and I'm like mumbling my way through the Great Thanksgiving trip. It was the least professional, liturgical. I was sort of like I cracked myself up, but I think it was quite distracting for people. A, we never do the Great Thanksgiving, and B, why does Pastor Bo have this giant mint rattling around in his mumble mouth while he's trying to do this? And it was embarrassing.
Dude, that's hilarious. When junk goes wrong when you're doing
Yep.
the Eucharist, it feels way worse
It
than when
does,
it goes wrong with other stuff.
for sure.
I had a layperson who was helping with communion, and they had been sitting where they could come up at the
Mhm.
time, and
Yeah.
I finished sermon, I praying, and then they're coming up because they're going to do the facilitate the Eucharist, and right after they do the bread, they run. They just leave. And we're not talking like they got emotional or something. We're talking from 0 to max run right down. This is big down the stage, blitzing out. And I'm like, oh, all right. Then he took the cup, and I'm like sitting here going, what's going on? And we go through it. I get done. This very elderly man, super, super human. Everyone should have him in their congregation. And after the service, now, there's like hundreds of people walking out, and you're doing the shaking hands thing, and he walks up after it in completely different clothes.
Oh,
And he
no.
goes, Reverend Fuller, I'm sorry. I had a bodily response to the table that required my immediate attention.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, note to self, you can use this story, but not at this church. Because,
Save it for later.
if we're serving the Eucharist, if anyone came up to you and said, I had a bodily response to the Lord's table, you're normally going to be like, awesome, tell me about it. But there was nothing about him showing up after a sprint and coming to greet me in new clothes that made me think I wanted any other details.
What's another funny thing
His
about
cup
being
was
a
over
pastor?
full.
One of the funny things about being a pastor is sometimes you don't know that people, they watch you so closely that they pick up on patterns, but until somebody finally asks you, hey, like, I've noticed this, can I ask you about it? You don't even know that they've picked up on the trend. So here's what happened this week. This is my new favorite story about communion. Somebody asked me this week, hey, I noticed that some months you take all the communion elements out to the garden and return them, back to the earth, right? Because once they've been blessed, right, you don't throw them away or dump them down the drain. But some months you keep the loaf, the uncut loaf, and you use it for peanut butter toast the rest of the week. It's a true story. True, this is a true story. And I said, I do, but I can't. I'm really surprised that you've noticed, like you picked up on that. And they said, but I can't figure out which months you keep it for peanut butter toast and which months you take it out to the garden. And I said, oh, it's really easy. The months that we do the dispersed tables, I don't save that bread because I don't know who's touched it, right? And so that gets returned back to the earth. But the months that we do classic communion, and I hold up the one loaf, the uncut loaf, and break it during the liturgy, I know that I've used hand sanitizer and I'm the only one who's touched that bread. And so that I keep for later in the week. But Trip, I had no idea that anyone noticed it.
That's funny.
Isn't that funny?
Yes. Oh man. Okay. We don't have to go back this, but Amanda left a really cool comment. I feel like we should just read it for everyone listening later.
Okay.
By the way, Amanda and Jonathan Foster do these really cool Substack lives. So if you're a Substacker, you should go check them out.
Oh.
I think
I just want to
Amanda, are you
say,
done with your doctorate, or are you in process? But she's doing her doctorate at Northwind with Tom, and she's also a lot of fun. We hung out at OrtCon. Anyway, her comment was, it seems very human to try to make meaning out of experiences and gathers other around it, whatever it is. The difficulty is letting go of what we've made. What is even harder is a dismantling of that thing in order to make something new. Maybe religion is about the macro process rather than the micro thing that was made. The non-dogmatic thing being the willingness to let go / destroy, or even the intention of deconstruction.
Yeah,
that's an audio retweet right there. Audio retweet.
Because once you get, that's what I think. What I was trying to say is, once you get, if you try and add the non-dogmatic yeast at the end, right? It's too late. It doesn't get into the dough. At that point, you're just dressing. It's just top dressing, right?
Yeah.
That's a deconstructive sort of topping at the end.
Okay, can I ask you a question that I didn't know?
Wait a minute. What was our safe word? Before you ask your question, what was our safe word if I needed to vacate?
Oh, you have a
I was going to tell you there's someone here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, don't do it now, because I was going to.
Well, if I don't want to answer the question, I'm going to say there's somebody at the door.
You're going to use it. Okay, so there's someone I went to church with a long time ago, like growing up, and her and her husband are like, they retired, got a RV, and they spend most of the year going to like emergency areas or like and running health clinics for like carnival workers, or the when you think of like someone who takes their faith seriously to spend their retirement helping others, and they're extremely conservative. And she posted this on her Facebook, and I wrote 5 or 6 responses, couldn't decide what to do. And you're a practical theologian.
Okay. Should be interesting.
Caring is sharing. It's the opening line. And then this was cut and pasted from some person that when I looked up, I was like, oh, that's not surprising this individual said this, though I find everything that occurs in this statement utterly problematic. So just want to make sure I'm reading. This is not Trip. The Muslim religion is the fastest growing religion per capita in the United States, especially in the minority races. Okay, I'm not optimistic after this statement.
Yeah, that's a bad start.
Last month attended a training. During the training session, there was representation of 3 speakers, Roman Catholic Protestant faiths, who each explained their beliefs. I was particularly interested in what the Islamic imam had to say. The Muslim gave a great presentation of basics of Islam, complete with a video. After the presentation, time was provided for questions and answers. When it was my turn, I directed the question to the Muslim and asked, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that most imams and clerics of Islam have declared a holy war against the infidels of the world, and that by killing an infidel, which is a command to all Muslims, they are assured of a place in heaven. If that is the case, can you give me a definition of infidel? There was no disagreement with my statements, and without hesitation, he replied, non-believers. I responded, so let me make sure I have this straight. All followers of Allah have been commanded to kill everyone who's not of your faith so they can have a place in heaven. Is that correct? The expression on his face changed from one of authority and command to that of a little boy who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He sheepishly replied, yes. I stated, well, sir, I have a real problem trying to imagine the Pope commanding all Catholics to kill those of your faith, or Dr. Stanley ordering all Protestants to do the same in order to guarantee a place in heaven. The Muslim was speechless. I continued, I also have a problem with being your friend when you and your brother clerics are telling your followers to kill me. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather have your Allah who tells you to kill me in order to go to heaven, or my Jesus who tells me to love you because I'm going to heaven and he wants you to be there with me? You could hear a pin drop. Needless to say, the organizers and promoters of the diversification training seminar were not happy with my way of dealing with the Islamic imam and exposing the truth about Muslim beliefs. In 20 years, there will be enough Muslim voters in the U.S. to elect a president. I think everyone in the U.S. should be required to read this, but the ACLU, there's no way this will be widely publicized unless each one of us sends it on. This is your chance to make a difference.
Oh my.
And I was like, well, okay, imagine this is posted by someone who actually organized their life around like natural disasters. They show up and help.
Yeah.
Running clinics and stuff. I mean, I have helped them run clinics for immigrants who don't have access to health care. And so I'm like, this is just wrong about Islam.
No, it is. It's absolutely wrong.
And I managed, this is what I responded. I was like, I know quite a few imams and I'm friends with Muslim theologians. They'd all find the reported presentation of their faith abhorrent. But then I'm like curious about this dude she shared, like, took this and pasted on. The number of this thing has been shared like thousands of times.
Oh no.
It led me into clicking into like crazy Christian nationalist groups.
Oh.
And like no one thinks, it's because I guess they have zero Muslim friends.
Okay.
And they think that this Imam one is representative, if it happened, of
right.
I'm sitting there going, what? Like, anyway, it's actually wrong for even conservative Muslims, right? Like, so I'm just like, that's not what they did when they've been in charge of multi-religious countries. Like, you're like, it is as crazy as like Christians being like, we can't trust Jews because they kill kids. And you're like, what? Anyway, so I don't know what to do with something like this because
it's deeply troubling.
The individual's actual life cares.
Yes.
And materially invest their retirement in caring for other people.
Yeah.
And is like, I'm worried there might be so many Muslims that they take over the presidency in America and then, jihad us. And I'm like, what do you do this? My initial responses were a lot more inflammatory. And then I'm like, maybe I shouldn't say anything. And then I'm like, no, like this person's my friend. She has been deeply loving to me. And if I was bearing false witness against an entire religion, I would want someone who knows more or has relationships to tell me.
Say, hey. Like, even if you DM'd them instead of posting on their page, if you DM'd them and said, hey, you got to take it down. That story is not true. And that's not what Muslims believe.
Yeah.
It's okay. So couple things.
You get how crazy, like, I'm like, what happened?
Yeah. Oh, all right. I have 3 just little snapshots that I want to run past you for this. I watched a thing this week about generational difficulties dealing with AI and fake news. It's really interesting, especially for me as a social constructivist, to look at how that baby boomer generation, they interacted with media, how they were shaped and formed during a different time, right? Where authority conducted itself in certain ways, right? And obviously you can get into the disillusionment after Watergate and the loss of belief in authority and all that sort of stuff.
In Vietnam.
What's that?
In Vietnam.
Yeah. I mean, all the way up till weapons of mass destruction with Dick Cheney dying this week and all of it.
I'm sure we're still looking for them.
But their relationship to quote unquote truth, right, is really concerning right now because of AI and fake news and other such things. And some people with very malicious intent, like whoever wrote this initial story, right?
Yeah. And all those, I've seen conservative friends and family members like sharing AI videos of people losing their junk because their Snap thing's not working, and it's clearly AI. I'm like, none of their kids move the entire time, and she has 6 fingers. Like, Like
I've heard about this. Yeah.
you know, and I just kept like leaving comments. This is AI. The only truth of this is your confirmation biases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those comments were
In
not
fear.
permitted
Yeah.
on a lot of my friends' walls.
Yeah. In fear, it's such a powerful motivator that when you are afraid of an other, right? Stranger, a foreigner. Oh, it is such a powerful thing. So I have a situation in my family right now where the generation ahead of me will post stuff on Facebook that's just simply not true. And we're trying to figure out, do we do an intervention? Do we take it away from them? Do we do like some educating orientation? Like, how are we going to handle this? Because it's not just embarrassing, and it is embarrassing, but it's also they're they're spreading to their networks lies.
Yeah.
So it is a real issue. So that's one component. The second thing is, I come from a missionary denomination, and this has deeply influenced how I think about things. Is the colonial missions model.
Mm-hmm.
And the honest truth is that the way that I hear people talk about Islam and Muslims and Muslim Americans is so deeply rooted in this colonial fantasy, I'll call it, and the strangeness of the Middle East, and it is so. I mean, Edward Said would call it Orientalism.
Yeah.
It is so deeply entrenched that anything that comes along that seems to confirm those preconceived notions and mentalities, it seems to ring true. And so there's nothing that gets filtered. It doesn't set off any alarms to say something's not right here, right? There's no red flag that goes up to say, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Right. And it is deeply troubling. I actually had a friend. I don't know if we're friends anymore. Do you remember back in the day when I used to blog a lot on Homebrewed, and I wrote the John 14:6 challenge?
Oh God, that was a classic episode. So for people that don't know, there was years Bo and I did this before we started it back again, and we used to get people to call in all the time. And John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Bo does this post on it, and then it's like, we want people to call in with how they deal with the text. And then we did a whole show playing all these calls, making commentary on dealing with the text.
Yeah.
And it was one of those episodes that very popular, got shared around a lot, enough that people in my congregation listened to it, and the ones that always had concerns about me were like, and our senior minister said, I think you should ask Tripp to bring his Bible and explain it to you.
So my basic premise in the thing was that it was Jesus. It's an invitation to the disciples. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me, right? It's an invitation to follow the way of Jesus. Islam didn't form right until the 7th century. He wasn't talking about that Muslims can't go to heaven, or
really?
whatever else people make it into. Jesus wasn't referencing that. It was an in-house conversation. He was speaking to the disciples, and it was an invitation to follow the way. So anyway, I had a friend
and
who
it's a freaking John. Like, this is the Logos, the cosmic Logos talking.
Yeah.
This isn't, anyway, it to me, every time I hear those things, I'm just like,
yeah,
well, this is what happens when people memorize random Bible verses and haven't read the whole freaking book. Like this is the same one where he's like, I got sheep in other pastures, like
John 10:10.
Yeah.
I know it happened again this week in Bible study.
I mean, I was just like, if you are going to harass someone with a graduate degree in the topic, you should at least have read all 40 pages of the book you're about to tell them they don't understand.
Yeah.
But maybe now these days, even doctors get that, someone shows up and tells the doctor, well, I did my own research. I'm pretty sure the Tylenol did it,
So I had a friend who was a missionary to a Muslim country, and he let me know that if I was right, he has wasted his entire life. And so that was a really tough conversation. But all of that is to say that Tripp
entire life.
That's what he said. So all of this is to say that people's identities and their very purpose and value of self-worth, unfortunately, is tied up in this, the strangeness of the other. And in our day, a lot of that gets channeled towards Islam. And it's a kind of self-identification and evaluation that, like, if you're not in those circles, I don't know that you and I can imagine the threat of not, like, if Islam is this big of a threat and you need to post this, because the sense of harm and intimidation is so visceral and deep that if you don't do something about it, you're the problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's unbelievable when I do get into these conversations with people who have anti-Islamic sentiment. How deep it runs in their consciousness is truly concerning.
Yeah. I had a conversation with one of the very conservative dudes at Cigar Lounge this week who was very disturbed about Zoran Mandami winning.
I see. Okay.
And he's going off on he's going to put Sharia law in charge of New York thing. And I asked, I said, I don't want to be difficult, but do you have any idea what the imposition of Sharia law is? And he starts describing it. And then I said, do you think someone whose faith would want them to establish that coercively on the most diverse city in the United States would, while running for election, go to drag queen story hours, gay clubs, and go dancing with his wife? Like, there's not a Muslim country where the fear you're worried about is led by a Muslim who is friends with rabbis, imams, and drag queens. Like, whatever your fear is, like the secret Muslim takeover of New York does not include a candidate who goes to gay clubs dancing at 1 a.m. because they don't exist where this is. So and if that community, you're suggesting that the overwhelming queer community of New York has been duped, and he duped them by being their friends and having them run his campaign. So what is the constituency that would even go for this apparently long, deep fake? I was like, you got to pick one. Maybe you could say he says he's a Muslim, but he's not one, because every true Muslim just wants to impose their thing and kill everybody. That's just wrong about Islam, but at least it's internally consistent. Or you would say, look, one of the great gifts of America is that on our best days, we make space for the beautiful expressions of all these religious traditions to inform our values in the way we engage in the public square and protect space for people to have those communities with their own internal integrity, and recognize that those faith traditions push us to cooperate for the well-being of all our neighbors, so that you could have a bunch of Jews, Christians, and atheists all voting for somebody because he thought it might be good for kids to have, I don't know, preschool or access to vegetables in by having state-run in grocery stores and food deserts. That like maybe your income level shouldn't determine access to green beans. Like I was like, you see what I'm saying? And he just looks at me. He's like, man, the liberal mind virus has really corrupted you. And I'm like, I was like, look, when I was working at the University of Edinburgh, my office mate is a Muslim theologian, a conservative Muslim theologian, who was one of my best friends in Scotland. And I was moved by his prayer practice to cultivate my own in the midst of lockdown, because we were both lonely and would occasionally Zoom and talk about our experience and how we're as dads. And when you don't get together in community, because we couldn't go to church and stuff, what are the practices of your faith that you can model and invite them into? And like we were then holding each other accountable for using the practices of our faith to be parents in a time of crisis where we're overwhelmed, all of our students are, and stuff. And I was like, it's like, I don't know if you have any Muslim friends, but like I'm a better Christian and it was a better father because we were friends. And at no point did either one of us not think we like our religion the best, but we also recognize the beauty in the other one and want to encourage the most beautiful expression. And I said, so you see how it's like hard for me to get what you're talking about? And he was just like, you've been corrupted. And I was like,
wow.
And I was like, it's hard to say like good friends are the liberal mind virus, but I guess so. If your ideology requires a level of totalitarian sameness and universalized absolutism, then perhaps.
Trip, I have something at the top of the hour, but I have 3 quick things to end on.
Okay.
It has been
one of them involve Valhalla.
We'll get there.
Okay.
It has been my experience that those that are most afraid of Islam in the United States, do you ever leave a dinner party and like you hated that there was one person who dominated the conversation and they really got under your skin, but then you realize as you're telling your partner how much you didn't like enjoy that person, you realized it's because I wanted to talk more. Like I didn't like that they talked so much because I wanted to talk more, and that's why it bothered me so much, right?
Believe it or not, Bo, I've had this experience.
Well, it is my assertion that those that are most afraid of Islam in America, it's because they wish that our Bible, our Christian Bible, worked like the Quran does. And what they really want is a fundamentalist Islamic interpretation of Christianity. That it's so ironic that what they're afraid of is the thing they most want, but for themselves. They just don't want them to have it.
Yeah. They don't want the word to be flesh. They want it to be a text, but their text.
Exactly. So that's my one observation is it is ironic that most people who get really angry and heated against Islam, they wish Christianity was more like what they think Islam is like. So that's one observation.
Okay.
Second thing, I just want to pray a closing prayer for whoever has to edit this episode.
We're not editing. We're giving it raw dog.
No, you're not. You can't. You're just going to put out a 2-hour ramble fest?
Yeah.
Come on. Oh, the ramble cast.
Yeah.
Black Betty, Ramble-lamb. Oh my gosh, this is going to be
that when could you imagine being that one hit wonder?
No.
And the only thing everyone's waiting for every time you
Yeah.
open up for some like reunited 70s rock band is, oh, Fat Betty, bring, bling, bling. And you're like, why do we have to do this song?
One of my favorite bands of all time is called the Getaway People, and I think they only have like 6 songs. I want to go to one of their concerts just because I'm curious what they do. You can't have a 6-song concert.
Dude, the other day, and I don't know why this showed up in my algorithm.
Yeah.
You know the boy band 98 Degrees?
Do I ever?
So, like, they were like the B side of boy bands
Sure.
for like they aren't NSYNC or Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
Well, apparently they got back together, and 3/4 of their concert are just covers from that time period. So they do like the thong song,
Okay.
and they do like Backstreet Boy or NSYNC song. They
I did
like
like the thong song.
they're just doing covers of songs that were popular on the radio
Really?
when their one song was popular, and then
Yeah.
they do like 1 or 2 of their songs. And
It's
I'm
almost
like,
the opposite of a tribute band.
yeah.
That's fascinating. All right.
They
My
were like,
final thing, because I got to get going. My final thing is I want to tell you about my favorite news story of the week and make sure that it made it onto your algorithm. Did you see the statement that the Attorney General of Kentucky had to put out?
I don't know. What was it about?
He had to make a statement explaining to Kentuckians that
Oh.
Kentucky, the polls aren't closed. There was no election in
Yes.
Kentucky this year. So many people overwhelmed the call-in line because they wanted to vote. And so the reporter started asking, well, what election did you want to vote in? And you know what they wanted to do, Trip? They wanted to vote against Mondani.
That's so crazy. I heard this. I didn't know it was Kentucky, but that you know what? And what fascinates me is like that's kind of ridiculous. But then the like moderate Democrat like people's responses are hilarious. Where they're like, oh well, because he got over 50%, then it was like, well, what's our cope? And because you couldn't have combined like the Republican and the neoliberal Democrat together in Mondami was still won. And I'm like, this is what happened was he won his party's nomination and then won again and beat the essentially like moderate Democrat and Republicans. And Trump endorsed the moderate Democrat, like, and he lost. If you don't like, I don't understand how the response to this is New York, which tends to be ahead of other cities like New York and Los Angeles, and like the coastal cities tend to be ahead of where the center is for the Democratic Party over time, but then the rest of it catch up. But I'm sitting there going, like, what tells you that half the Democrats are corporatist stooge more than Trump, who argued with Cuomo the entire time he was in office last time during COVID, endorses the guy just because they are collectively scared that there might be a voice in a political party that doesn't want to just bend over for a bunch of billionaires. Like, and that is not the number of moderate Democrats that come up with ways of minimizing. I'm like, no, he beat them twice. And just so you know, the head of the Senate, Democrat from New York, won't say who he voted for. He voted for the guy Donald Trump endorsed and was beat twice. Anyway, I just hope Senator Schumer doesn't run again or someone primaries him, because it's like completely ridiculous. I swear, Republicans are crazy, but Democrats are stupid. They just are so committed to big money. They can't imagine a political party where they actually cared about working class people. And at this point, they basically care for people with graduate degrees that are boomers or above. And it's nuts. All right, I'm pausing because I know you got to go. But Bo, just know that you just saved yourself by timing this at the end. About a 15-minute rant.
Power to the workers.
Yeah. I mean, that was not, I mean, that's how Jesus got all his disciples. Just saying.
It's a good note to end on.
No, we're not done. You got to give your benediction.